If you think your thoughts and opinions do not matter, or if you fear taking the next steps towards a better you, or if you allow other people to take free reign of your life, now is the time to put an end to these limiting beliefs. Welcome to Change Your View, a podcast that will help you take back control to have a well-lived life and the conviction that your life is to have meaning. Join Hasina Shahid Jackson in discussions aimed at overcoming the limitations of physical sight to see with spirit, hope, and faith. Each episode will empower you to develop the courage and self-assurance to go after the life you want. Here is your host, Hasina.
Hello, Cosmo. I'm so glad to have you join me today on Change Your View.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
No, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
And I'm excited about what we're about to chat about today because it is so important. And you have a purpose about financial freedom. And that is so vital because we can get so caught up in the power of money that we misuse money and we take it for granted. And I just want you to go into a little detail of what does that really mean about financial freedom?
Let me first get into like how I got to that stage in the first place, right? Like I was born in India, but then I grew up in a country called Kuwait, which is a country in the Middle East. And a lot of people would know about it because that's where that was the nation that Iraq invaded in 1990, and that was also the nation from which the American military invaded Iraq in 2003, right? And I grew up during that time. And one of the things that I noticed as an Indian immigrant, and I became a naturalized citizen of America later on. But at that time, when I was an immigrant, right, from India, I noticed that there's a lot of people came to the Middle East, right, to all these GCC countries, and they would work for starvation wages. Like they would get paid less than $100 a month, and they're either drivers or they're construction workers, and they're basically either like cleaning or cooking, and a lot of these people are barely able to make ends meet, but they're sending their money back home. But what I noticed is that because they did not know how to start a business back in their own country, or they did not know how to monetize, and they did not understand how money works, and because they came from a scarcity mindset, they had to go to these countries where they were treated pretty badly, right? Especially in Kuwait, like the natives of that country treated like the Indian immigrants and immigrants from other nations, similar to how white people would treat Black people in the pre-1950s, 1960s era, right? Before that time. And when I came to America, that's when I realized that, oh, wow, segregation is not okay, you know? Because when I was over there, I noticed that the way they treat the immigrants is like different. But all of this could change, and it could be different if we were financially free and we could choose the environment that we were living in, right? Like what I realized during my time in Kuwait, as I grew up and I saw my dad working in business and all that, trying to start his own business, is that if you are financially free, or if you have control over money and all that, you can change your environment. You can change your circumstances. You can determine who you're exactly living with, like who you interact with and don't interact with. There's a lot of bad people out there, and there's a lot of xenophobia, racism, and all that. But you don't have to hang on with those people if you are financially free, and if you're having your own business and you basically understand how finances work, right? And that's one of the lessons that I learned when I was in Kuwait, was that if I only knew how to make a business work and how to make finances work, and I make it work for me, I can go wherever I want. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to answer to anybody, right? Because a lot of times, like even like in that country, when you go and work for these bosses, and like even in America and like all anywhere you go, like there's a lot of work environments where it's not right, and like the way the people treat you is not right. But you can control that if you have your own business. And so like I finally came to America, and then I realized, and then I thought the American identity of freedom it was all about freedom. But the way it's still the same like in America, but it's different. But people are still suffering from living paycheck to paycheck. Some are working only 2 or 3 jobs, and they're basically barely trying to make ends meet. There's stagnant wages. There's inflation going on. They're stuck in debt, and something has to be done about it, you know?
So do you see financial freedom being only possible as an entrepreneur, or you can be financially free as well and working a job? can both, I mean, so just so I'm clear on how you are seeing how a person can become financially free.
So there's like I think I read this book called Cash Flow Quadrant, right, by Robert Kiyosaki, and he talks about there are four quadrants, namely you're an employee, you're self-employed, and then you're a business owner and are in control of a system, and you're an investor, right? And essentially, if you, let's say, have a job, but you're taking a part of that money and you're investing it into assets that appreciate, then over time you could be financially free. But you're
Okay.
still being an investor. But ideally, the other effective way is having your own business or doing entrepreneurship, right? Like by being like an employee or being self-employed, it's really difficult to do that.
So based on what I'm hearing here, then a person can work a job, however, use a portion of their income from that job to either be seed money to either invest in something or to launch their own business. However, if they only invest, they will be limited because they still won't have the financial freedom unless they invest in something like property or maybe some kind of business where they can be like a silent investor or some kind of business that they can do part-time, for instance, like selling, direct marketing. Is that what I'm
Yeah.
understanding?
Yeah, basically, like you have to ultimately invest your money, or if let's say you're not doing business, you're an employee, you have to invest your money in assets that are appreciating. Like let's say you bought real estate and then you rented it out. Now you're having passive income. You still did the job, but then you're basically utilizing the money you made from that to basically invest in assets, or you're investing in a business, and that's how you do it.
Well, let me ask you this. How can a person, let's say that's in debt, they have debt, what steps can they take to start getting out of debt to become financially free?
So there's like normally the conventional wisdom where like you pay off your debts, right? But during my time when I was interviewing other entrepreneurs, and especially like multimillionaires, right? They came up with a specific process which is called acquiring strategic debt to basically get assets that appreciate and then use that to pay off existing debt. So let's say you have like about $10,000 of consumer debt, right? And then let's say you took a credit, you took a line of credit, and then you utilize it to buy, let's say, for instance, Bitcoin. And let's say Bitcoin shot up in value from $10,000 to maybe like $30,000. You can now use that money to basically pay off like your existing debt, and you'll still make a profit at the end of it. But that's just like an example. Obviously, don't take my advice on it. Like Bitcoin goes up and down,
Right,
but
right.
right. But a lot of things I see is a lot of like these millionaires, right? What they do is they take on, in order to pay off their debt, they take on let's say like a real estate, right? And then they rent it out. And then basically they pay the real estate value appreciates, and then they might later on sell it, and then that profit that they make from that, they use it to pay off debts that they already have. So it's not like linear where they're utilizing liquid money to pay off the existing debt. They're using strategic debt for the accumulation of assets which are appreciating.
Okay. I like that word you said, strategic debt. The one thing about real estate that you point out, though, is that it takes a period of time for the appreciation to occur. But I get the point. The point is to invest in something where you can appreciate your value of money to help you and then pay off the debt that you owe. That's the
Yeah.
whole process. So finding those opportunities that will create avenues for you to build some form of wealth to then decrease your debt.
Yeah, I was just giving an example,
No,
but
no, no, no. And I just want to make sure I'm clear for someone else, that's listening, because so the whole thing about the financial freedom, because you went over to what happened to you in Kuwait and the disparity in treatment. So what methods are you utilizing today to help educate people on just what the financial freedom could do for them? What are you doing?
So one of the things that I'm doing right now is that I'm the podcast host of a thing called Extraordinary America, where I'm basically interviewing entrepreneurs and business people that are basically I ask them for their stories, and I see how they succeeded in their own business. And basically, I'm asking for the mindset, right? Because a lot of times is it's all about the mindset. Like if you have to think and act in certain ways, and you have to do things in a certain way, And when you do those things, you become successful in business, right? And if you are like, a lot of things involve perseverance. You have to basically be the architect. You got to have a vision. You got to know how to monetize. And mindset is half the battle. Like half of the half of the battle or the war comes in like our own self and our belief in ourself and the confidence in that. The other half comes in like techniques and tactics in business and all of that. And what I've learned from interviewing, like at this point, it's about 70 to 80 people that I've interviewed, right? And like I've noticed like a certain pattern. And these are the patterns that all successful entrepreneurs and business people do, and they achieve success. And I'm part of organizations that have that where I meet entrepreneurs and business people, and I have conversations with them, and they also talk about all of this.
So a couple of different things that you raised there. One is mindset. And I want to go back to that for a minute, because I was listening to a message today and it talked about the words that we speak to ourselves. And that's part of mindset. So if a person is stuck in, because our mind is trained to be in the negative realm, it's always focusing on the negativity. So you have to train your mind to be positive. So to train your mind to be positive is that you have to develop habits and mantras that you say to yourself every day. Like, for instance, I think if you want to be successful, you have to speak words of wealth. You don't say, well, if I could, would, or should. You have to say, I am and I will, and put it and speak it out there to become reality, because what you think upon is what you expand upon. So mindset is powerful. But the other thing that you brought up was your community and your circle. Because I think a lot of people fail to realize that it's okay to be a loner, but together we can help lift each other up. I mean, that's saying that if one person falls down, it's a shame if they have no one to lift them up. So let's elaborate a little bit on that, because it's important to have someone, if you fall down, that's able to help you stand back up. And you alluded to that a little bit in your comment there.
Hasina, like I couldn't agree more, right? Because you're the five people that you hang out with the most. And one of the things I noticed is that a lot of like successful entrepreneurs, they have to get out of environments where people are naysayers, right? You could have your friends and your family that have a negative mindset, and that'll actually affect your ability to do business. Because ultimately, like what do you put into your subconscious mind plays a huge role. You have to be surrounded with people that are positive and that are also in the same entrepreneurial mindset. And a lot of times it's a lonely road, because most people, they're not on this path, and they have like very negative views on like how money is, like, oh, all rich people are evil or greedy and all. But no, money is ultimately neutral, right? It's how we use it. Like, is it for good or for bad? That truly matters. So you're right. You have to surround yourself with people that are positive and that have the same similar mindset of where you are or where you want to be.
So one other thing I want to go back to so you came over here from Kuwait. Did you have family already living here?
I had my aunt and uncle in New Jersey, and
Okay.
and then like, yeah, I had family in the New Jersey, New York area, and I'll come to visit them for vacations and everything. So yeah.
So how was it making that adjustment? Because I go through the fact that we just talked about community. So you had to really start over and build your circle, correct?
Yeah, I came to Texas, and then I came there for university, and I had to start from scratch. Like I was doing college and university, and then I met like I started from there, but I didn't know a single person. Like my family, like they were all the way on the other side, like on the east side of America. Like I was all the way in Texas.
How did you adjust? So tell me about that, because a lot of times, and the reason why I'm asking this question, because you came from a place where you were known and it was comforting, and then you came into an environment where you knew no one and you stretched yourself. And I'm sure there had to be some fear there, because a lot of times I talk about the fact that we have to be willing to break out of what we know in order to go to somewhere that is unknown to become the person that we need to be. And that's what I see what happened to you. So tell me, how did you do that?
Hasina, like, have you seen that movie Avatar? Like where where the guy comes from to another planet, and then you have to learn how the Na'vi think and act. That's literally how it was when I came to America. I was pretty excited because it was really new and it was different. The culture is so radically different from like the Middle Eastern and like the East, like Asian culture altogether. that it was just like I had to learn everything from scratch, like the culture, the male-female social dynamics, how people view the world and how they do things and all of that. And it was just, it took some, I was like kind of like a scientist observing human nature, but it was like it was like the American human nature. And just different people had different beliefs and everything. And what I would consider totally strange and abnormal was just considered like really normal to a lot of Americans. And I was like, whoa, how did they come up to that? Like, how did they come to this conclusion? You know, like there were some things that I took for granted when I was like in Kuwait and India. And I was like, and then I realized that, oh, wow, like this is just like, it's different, you know?
So, I mean, and that's amazing. So you had to make that big adjustment. And then for you to see that based on that adjustment, you found the path of financial freedom. And so how did you break those barriers to really be able to connect with people to say, hey, I'm really trying to help you? And what was the challenges that you faced really getting people to listen to you?
I think like I'm still on my way to financial freedom, first of all, right? Like there's all this work to do. But one of the things that I realized over the period of years, right, is that everything stems from identity. And the biggest challenge we have is like our identity and what comes with it. Because from our identity comes our beliefs, and from our beliefs come our capabilities and the actions that we take, right? So a lot of people have certain identities that need to be transformed, but like basically the root cause of success and failure I've noticed is that they're holding on to identities that don't work for them anymore. That's basically causing them to go into scarcity mindset altogether, which in turn causes poverty, right? You have to have an identity that is healthy and whole. But the biggest lesson that I learned and the biggest challenge that there is understanding that you are not who you are. Like your identity is temporary. You're basically the consciousness. You're basically the son and daughter of like a higher being, like of God, right? And then this is your temporary identity. And it is through this that we project our reality, but that identity can be altered. Let me give you an example, right? So when I was like till 3 years old, I had the identity that I was an Indian, right? And then I came to the Middle East, and I had the identity that I'm part of like that I'm like part of Arab culture or whatever. Then I came to America and I became an American citizen. And now I took on the identity of the American. But you notice that there's like whether I'm an Indian with the Indian traits or an American, you realize that these are two different identities, but eventually you converge them and you take the best of both of them and you leave the negativities out of them and you create what is called a super identity, which
Mm.
basically benefits you, you know?
So you really have to understand, sounds like to me, you still have a basis of who you are or who you want to become. Because if you say leave the bad things behind and pick up the good things, you have to have some sense of purpose and belief in self that you can be your best self. So you try to pick up all the best things about that you have and put them together into this new identity that forms to make you into the best person that you can be. Is that what you're saying? Am I saying that right or no?
Yes, your identity in this world is all is temporary, and that's the biggest thing you gotta know. Like you are not your nationality, you're not your gender, you're not your ethnicity, you're something much more than that. A lot of the problems in this world happen because we identify with these temporary identities, but you gotta realize, like you are the best of all of everything, right? And
Okay.
who you are is who you want to be, and it comes from your core purpose, understanding who you are and what God wants you to do, right? And it's regardless of what religion you're from, what ethnicity you're from, because that ultimately is part of like the national context, but you are something much more than that, and it comes from like a higher place, right? Like you one thing you have to realize is that when you die, you're no longer the identity that you thought you were. You become something completely different. And I think if people realize that, then and that they are actually meant to be free, that freedom is their birthright, and it's something that transcends even their deaths, then that's something I think would be a core part of who they are, irregardless of what their nationality is, you know?
Yeah, and I like that because I think about I was reading today and it's It's always ironic when you have a conversation with someone and it goes back to what your reflection was, well, my reflection was for the day. So I was reading because I have my quiet time, and I was reading in scripture where it talked about the different parts of the body. So every part of our body is for a purpose. I can't tell my eyes I don't want them to be my eyes, because then I wouldn't be able to see visually. And I can't say I don't want a nose, because my eyes can't be my nose. So everything has a purpose, and it comes together into this melting pot so that we can all be together in community. And there's no disparity. So one part is not no better than another part. There might be some sensitive parts, like it says, but the point is that collectively, all these pieces need to work together. And that's what we need to understand. So when someone goes through life challenges and adversities and things happen, they need to take the good pieces out of that challenge and adversity and apply it to themselves to move forward, to become a better person. So I don't say bounce back, I say bounce forward. So that's what I'm segueing to that, because you just really hit it on the head with taking the components of the self that you as you grow to form this person that you need to be, and not beating yourself up because of the things that happen to you.
Like, Hasina, you bring up a great point, and I wanted to like add on to it, right? So like when we're talking about challenges and overcoming it, so when I was in Kuwait, right, I had an inferiority complex as like an Indian immigrant, right? Because I was like, oh, the Kuwaitis are superior and all of that, and I just thought that was just how it was and everything. But if I did not have those experiences, and then I would not be where I am today, where I'm so passionate about financial freedom, right? Because like I came to America and I realized that, like, whatever happened to, let's say, like in the 1920s, 1930s era, where there's like segregation. I looked at this and I was like, oh wow, this sounds like what happened to me with the Kuwaitis and everything, right? But the way I deal and process with it is that I decided that something must be done about freedom. And what created those conditions was that if I was financially free, or if my parents were financially free, then they would have the choice of going wherever they want, where people would treat them well. You don't have to be in that place. Like, a lot of immigrants right now all over the world, and I'm not just talking about America, they go to these different countries out of necessity to make money. But let's say the money was not an issue, right? And like that, and then they had a positive identity or relationship with understanding how money works, then they would basically not put themselves in those positions, and they could be wherever they want. Like, freedom, I think, plays a very big role. But ultimately, these challenges that we have in our life, like, if we take the positive out of it, we can use that to help a lot of people. So a lot of people think that there's a lot of negativities that happen to their life. Think of it as God basically giving you that so you can have compassion for other people, and then you can help other people, and then your story becomes the inspiration to create a change that will last for a long, long time.
One thing I want to touch upon, because we've used the word so many times, and I would really like to get your thoughts. The word freedom, what does it really mean to be free? Because I know I'm not talking about the slavery part. I'm thinking about the freedom part in terms of your mindset and the actions and behaviors. What do you think about that, to really be free? Because that's the thing about the financial freedom. So freedom is the result of the actions that we take that allow us to really be, what's the word I want to say? Not bound to things that can hold us back.
I would say that freedom is not having attachments, right? Because a lot of times we are attached by the things in our life. Like, a lot of people have a lot of money, right? But they're still not free because they're attached to the materialism around them, right? If you're attached to a certain lifestyle, if you're attached to, let's say, like consumerism, where you have to get stuff all the time, you cannot live without this or that, you're not free. Freedom is the ability to master your mind and to have a sense of non-attachment. It has to come from within, and then it plays out externally, right? Even like with financial freedom, like, if you're not already free within, you don't feel free within, it's not going to come outside. Like, you have to have a sense of non-attachment and letting go of the outcome, giving it to the higher power. And then when you're free inside, naturally it starts manifesting outside, right? And then opportunities just show up. And then the energy that you attract, basically, from that sense of non-attachment, ultimately leads to your freedom. But you're right about
Yes.
that. Like
You hit it
freedom,
on the head. Yes, you hit it
it,
on the head.
it comes from mindset, it comes from within. Like it's something like it comes from I don't like it comes from not needing the external validation of other people or external things to make you happy. You have to be self-reliant on your own internal state, and you got to create that. And from that internal freedom comes eventually external freedom. But that's just my opinion on it.
No, and that's what I was thinking, because we're talking about the financial freedom. However, that's only a component of actual freedom. We have to get free first within our own mind and our body, so that we don't think we are in control of things that we can't be, but also to know that we have to release those things that we allow to place us in bondage, to hold us back to really being our true self, to just go forward and living a life of fulfillment and being at peace. Because a lot of times, and another thing I was contemplating today was the concept of thriving, which goes back to financial freedom. People think that thriving means that I'm going to have this mass amount of money and things, but that's not what thriving it really is. To me, thriving is really equated to freedom, which we've been talking about today in some ways.
Yeah, it comes down to like basically an abundance mindset, right? You a lot of times like the difference between freedom and not being free is the scarcity versus abundance mentality we have towards everything in our life, including our relationships, right? I think there's like the saying like where there's it is one of these groups, like I learned this law called like there's like a first bank versus a second bank dynamic, right? Where if you showed neediness or desperation, right, and people outside sense that scarcity mindset or this not free mindset within you, they're not going to give you what you want. You have to display that non-attached abundance mindset or the letting go of the outcome mindset. And that's when things come to you. And that's ironically how you become free.
Yes.
Like it's all about that state, right? That emotional state and the mental state. It's hard to do when you're like when there are financial troubles and everything. But if you always have that state and you master your mind, then that's when things start to change.
Okay. So I mean, so there's so much that goes into freedom. I mean, financial freedom is a component, there's spiritual freedom, there's emotional freedom. So freedom, we need to really look at how we can become free in all aspects of our life to become the best person that we can be. And one of your things that you're pushing is a financial freedom. So we need to learn how to not allow debt to rule our lives, but instead find ways to get out of debt so that we can be free in that aspect. Because a lot of times the financial stress causes us to be so weighed down that we then become overwhelmed in other aspects of our life, because money, as you said in your bio, causes us to live a life being totally desperate and uncomfortable and making unwise decisions, that it rules us instead of us ruling it.
No, Asina, you hit the nail on the head, right? Because yeah, like a lot of times, like it does dictate our conditions and where we are and what we do and all of that, like the environments that we're in, the time frames that we have. I would say most of this world, right, especially if you go to like third world countries, it's dictated by their financial conditions. But to change that, we have to change our mindset and the way we see that world. And then we got to find people that are like us and then create that synergy all together. And then that's how it happens. That's why communities and groups are so important, right? Because you feed off each other. Like you don't want to be, if you're like one of the things I learned, Hasina, is that environments tend to be more powerful than willpower. You know, if you're one person and then there are one positive person and then there's 100 negative people, like eventually they're going to wear you down, right? Because they'll be stopping all your ideas and all that stuff, and then your attempts to help yourself and them, right? So if you, but in order to maintain that, you have to at sometimes go within, or you got to find like-minded people, and then you got to change the environment by gathering the scattered people and then bringing them together, you know?
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this conversation has been very enlightening for me. You've given me some food for thought. I love what you said about trying to find avenues to pay off your debt. And sometimes you might have to go back into debt again, but you have to be mindful of the opportunity. Because like you said, Bitcoin, you use that example, but that's not what you're saying to do. You're saying to look for opportunities where you can accumulate some finances to pay off the debt that you have. And that's where we have to be open to opportunities and not limit ourselves based on our job. Instead, you have to look outside the box. And we're not saying not to have a job, it's just to find opportunities where you can have multiple sources of income. I think that's the best way to say it, multiple sources of income. So is there a parting thought that you want to leave with the viewers today? Is there something that you want them to think about, to reflect upon, to help them take the next steps forward in finding their path to financial freedom, but also freedom overall?
I would tell to like your audience that the path to freedom is always through knowledge and education, not only just in finance, but also understanding yourself, knowing who you are, knowing your why, and knowing your purpose. Because when you have that fire within, then naturally the answers will start coming from an intuitive place, right? You have to understand what you're passionate about, what you love doing, and then you got to monetize that, right? But most importantly, like I would advise everyone to practice meditation, right? And meditation and try to master the mind. Because when you master your mind and your emotional state over a period of time, and you get that calm, non-attached state, and then you come from that area, then magical things happen because now you're unfazed. Like a lot of times we go through suffering because we are attached to impermanent things. The things that are in the world, they're eventually going to go. So if you're going to get sad over things that are impermanent, like then you're going to go through the ups and downs of life. But if you're in your core and you believe and you understand that there's something immortal within you that doesn't die, and you have that calm, non-attached state, and you're centered around yourself, then that's when you start getting everything you want in life.
And you raise that interesting point, and I just want to leave people with that, is that if you say to yourself every day that I am going to be successful, then your mind thinks of ways to achieve this success. But if you say to yourself every day, I must suffer, then your mind will find ways for you to suffer. So you have to place the words in your mind that you want to meditate and reflect on, so that it will help you create and think of the opportunities and actions that you can take to realize that word that you planted in your mind that you want to focus on. Because like I say before, what you think upon is what you expand upon. So I thank you so much, Cosmo, for what you have enlightened us with today, with your knowledge and wisdom and your own experiences, because we all are here to learn from each other and to grow and to just keep moving forward. And I say we must keep leveling up in our life to become the best person that we can be. And that's taking all the things that happen to us and putting them together to become that best person.
Thank you, Hasina, for taking the time to interview me, and you're enlightening as well, and I really appreciate that.
I thank you for today, and we'll be back on again soon. So everyone, thank you for this segment of Change Your View, and we'll see you again on the next episode.
This concludes this episode of Change Your View. Let this conversation help you navigate life's challenges, emerging from that seemingly endless pause that you are experiencing. Regain command of your own path and resist being boxed in. Visit hsjackson.com for more inspiring and eye-opening discussions. Stop walking in the shadows of other individuals. No longer allow inferior perspectives to brainwash you. Do not be forgotten. You have the authority and power over you. Make the most of your abilities. Thank you for listening. Until next time.